Startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Kastner.
And I'm Caitlin Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by Mug.News. Eze Redwood is a successful ecosystem builder who has been active in the community since 2006. He has co-founded 5 businesses in addition to contributing to countless other projects. And now he is currently the Vice President of Lily and James Creative, Managing Director of LV8, Strategic Advisor to We the Project, and partner of the Restaurant Wings Cafe. Eze, it is great to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks so much for having me. And just as a quick note, so we actually, LV8 was acquired by Lily and James Creative. So that's how I came to Lily and James.
That's awesome. Incredible. So I figured we could maybe just jump right in. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, great. So the first question that I have for you is, how did you first become involved in your startup community?
I think I did Startup Weekend a long time ago. I had a buddy who was a senior developer for Garmin. And one time we were roommates and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to the Startup Weekend thing. You should come." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, that actually sounds kind of interesting." And so I went and fell in love and made a bunch of awesome friends. And, we just kind of kept building together from there.
That's really fun. So was this something you were planning on going into? So like entrepreneurship, or was this just kind of a chance event that made you very interested? Yeah,
I had been an entrepreneur before with small ventures. Just in like high school and even before that, and then in college. But I hadn't really thought through exactly what I was going to do. I was debating going into strategy and management consulting. I was debating a few other options at the time. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, yeah, that's right. That's exactly what we need to do.
Well, that's great. So then what's one thing that you would say people don't know about your startup community?
That it was intentional. I think that's one of the things that I see that people don't realize is it actually took a lot of strategy, a lot of work to build it, and a lot of intentionality. And a lot of the wins that came as a result of a lot of execution on the strategy that fortunately was a good strategy, right? And so we were able to come together. But yeah, I think, sometimes we don't really treat building the ecosystem like a business, but you really kind of have to if you want to build something great.
That's great. And it makes complete sense. We talk about startup communities and people and just startups in general. It's very focused on that. But then definitely I agree with what you're saying, where we need to look at the bigger picture in order for these success stories to continue to happen. Yeah. So then kind of like playing along with that idea, if I were to start a business in your community, would I be eligible for any grants, or are there any loans available?
Yes. So there are loans available. We actually worked to get loans available. So we had the $5 million loan fund that we set up. The grants, I don't think there are any grants at the moment because there's been so much going towards the coronavirus response and helping, kind of the small business there. But it's something that we're actively working on, and hopefully we'll have some backup and replenish soon.
Definitely. And I think, so talking to other entrepreneurs as well, that we're definitely living in a kind of tricky time with COVID. But I think something that's unique about entrepreneurs is that we're able to be very flexible and bounce back. Do you have any comments on that potentially
I think that's one of the most important traits. If you don't have a strong resolve, then you probably will not make it. Unless like I mean, even if you just strike gold, right? I think of Flappy Birds, right? He was like, man, the pressure is hard. Everyone's talking crazy to me, right? And he was successful. He was making money, right? And it's still a pressure. So no matter which way you go, even if whether you have instant success or whether people don't understand the vision right away, well, you're going to have to make some hard decisions, and you're going to have to deal with a lot of pressure and a lot of people's opinions, and you've got to win them over in a lot of cases, depending on your business, of course. But yeah, I'd say that's most of it. It's one of those things where, yes, you have to have a good product, and yes, you have to, or service or offering. And yes, you have to solve a real problem for people, but you also have to deal with the ups and downs and be resilient throughout those. And as most entrepreneurs can tell you, sometimes you get the best news and the worst news in the same days or the same weeks. And you're like, man, we just got our first client, and at the same day, couple hours later, we found out that our mainframe is corrupt or whatever it may be. Like that didn't happen to us per se, but this happened to other people. I've seen it, so I'm gonna borrow their story for this. But yeah, and so, so much of it is the mental resolve. And even going through COVID, I see it as something similar to, I see it embodied as a story that someone told me when we were at the Forbes Summit, Under 30 Summit in Detroit with We the Project, a company connecting the film industry. There was a dinner we had with someone who said that, they and their friends were on a boat, and the boat was about 4 miles off the coast, and it capsized, And so they're on the sinking boat. They had to make a decision. And so they had to make a decision whether they were going to live or die, essentially. And that's kind of how I see COVID as far as this. The options are there for a lot of industries. Some is just not, right? Your model is prohibitive of, survival in this industry, and you're not able to pivot within that. But there's a lot of models where you can adapt. And I think the first step of that is deciding that you're going to make it. Like, I am going to make it. I'm going to survive. And so, like, going back to that case, like if that boat capsizes, the first thing, that successful entrepreneurs have to do is they have to say, hey, I'm going to survive and I'm going to make it, right? And then once you do that, then it really triggers the next level thought process where you're like, okay, well, how? Right? The water's cold. So maybe I swim back to the boat and I grab the wetsuits and see if there's life preservers and see if there's any bottled water and see if there's anything that can help me as I try to make this 4 mile swim. But it's also really easy to just accept your fate and be like, woe is me, I am going to die. Right. And so you really have to make that decision. And then once you make that decision, then, is the time where you're able to have that creativity and, really clear your mind, because you never come up with your best ideas or best solutions when you're really mad or really sad or really panicked. Right. So it's up to you to calm your nerves and calm your mind, find that place of tranquility, even if you're just locking that stuff in the box for a little bit, and say, hey, I am going to make it. Let me calm myself and think about the best ways for me to do this. What do I need to do to survive? And then go from there. So long story short, it's mostly that right now, but also in general.
Yeah, what really stands out to me about that is just that call to action. Like you said, you make a choice and you got to stick with it. And so that's what really stood out to me, is just continuing that forward motion. So then if I were to move to your community tomorrow, what would you say should be the first place to start?
I think we have a BizCare office as part of the city. We have the EDC and which is Economic Development Corporation Council. I think the C's confused. I can never remember which one it is. But if you do EDC, KC, you'll get pretty close. And then KC SourceLink, I think they're a good place to start, and Startland News. So you can go to startlandnews.com and if you look at Startland News, I'll give you an idea of some of the activity going on, and you can always reach out to them or to KC SourceLink and get pointed in the right direction.
That's great. So then kind of like going along the lines of connectivity and getting involved, this question might be altered a bit for COVID, but what coffee shops would entrepreneurs usually hang out in?
Yeah. Oh man. That's why it's a hard one. So there's a few, right? So if you're a little bit in the southern part of the city, there's Black Dog, and they also have one in the downtown area called Messenger Coffee. So just beautiful spaces. And us entrepreneurs, as much as we try to pretend to be like low maintenance, like we need really nice spaces. Like we like high design, Yeah, but yeah, and then Dalmaeus is like the people's coffee, and so they're really great. They're really active in building communities as well. And Bo Nelson is like been a fixture in the community from the very beginning. And then you have a few places that are kind of like just great spots. So I think of Cafe Corazon. It's smaller, but it's a great spot. I think of Monobar is great for like tea, especially for those who don't drink coffee. And they have the best teas that are like hand rolled and like directly from the farms in East Asia, wherever they get them from, depending on the tea. So yeah, there's a bunch of great spots, but find what works best for what is my advice, because I have a certain spot for depending on what I need done. So like sometimes I need something creative, then I go to Monarch Coffee, right? Or other times I'll like need more energy. Maybe I'm doing some design work or something, so I'll go to Messenger Coffee or Dalmaeus. So yeah.
No, that's the first time we've had where it's like all these coffee shops for different personality and and like whatever you need to get done. And I didn't realize until you pointed it out, but I definitely do the same thing with different coffee shops. Since we are Mug.News, a fun question we like to ask is, what's your typical coffee drink? Do you have one?
Yeah. I like a dirty chai latte, whipped no foam. And a touch of sweet.
Yes, so that's definitely going to give you that extra caffeine boost that you need to get all those projects done. Oh
yeah, and oat milk, that's important, right? Because the regular milk just kind of makes you think sore, and so like the oat milk's a really big part of that as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just kind of like also a tangent on oat milk. It's so much better for the environment. Like it's so good for the environment. So I guess just a plug for oat milk. We're not sponsored, but
shout out oat milk.
Yeah, shout out. So so those coffee shops are like great ways to connect. But then on a more official level, are there any co-working spaces in your area? Yeah,
so I'm actually a member of PlexPod. And PlexPod's like they've got 5 or 6 locations around Kansas City. You can access any of those locations. They've got like a really, really big one. They've got small boutique ones that are high style for those people who like, the exotic plants and chandelier kind of, but it's like cool vibes and stuff like that. Like cool chandelier, just to be clear. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, having those is really important, I think. So PlexPod, man, they're just so fantastic. Like if anyone comes here, like, you've got to check out PlexPod, and they've got to check out, obviously WeWork is here as well, and they have some offices, and they've hosted a lot of the big, things that we've done here. And so they've been a really great community steward as well. So we're blessed and fortunate to have two really great co-working entities in WeWork, and with Eric and with PlexPod, with Gerald, and they just like kill it. So between the two of them, like we're super well taken care of and super fortunate,
Yeah. So I guess my other question is are they being affected by COVID right now? Are they kind of closed, or is it limited access?
I think it's limited. It's limited access, but people kind of shuffle into their office spaces and then shuffle out now, whereas before it used to be a little bit more communal. They used to do a lot of community programming and stuff like that. So yeah, a little bit, but it's still there. It's still there. You can still find people if you need to. And
kind of like what we talked about earlier, it's just about kind of finding that creative fix and how can you still get your goal done, but then just doing it a little different way just because of COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. And and the nice thing is, like, our VCs have offices in the co-working spaces. So that's really cool too. At least some of them do. So it gives you that accessibility.
So then where would I go to learn more about upcoming events in the startup community?
So I think Startland News is a good source. The 1 Million Cups Kansas City. I think that's a really good source for all the things, and then like Casey Source Links has like an event calendar, so that's really good as well, But yeah, it really is. If you like, all of the community leaders here are really welcoming, whether it's like the Donald Hawkins or Casey Collective, the Laurens with Innovate Her, the whole crew at Casey SourceLink, they're all very accessible. The 1 Million Cups crew. So, all you have to do is say, hey, I want to talk to one of the people. And like, people just know who you're talking about. Like, okay, cool. We've got you. We'll connect you.
That's really great. So then what would you say was the most successful startup from your community?
We've had several of them, we did something called the Kansas City Startup Village a while ago that focused solely on creating community within a geographic area. And so we had Homes for Hackers with free rent for people. You just had to pay utilities for you and your team for several months. To just give you time to work on your company, building your company. We had the Brad Feld House, which was similar as well. And then we just had that community of people who in close proximity, like, could help each other out and create that in like a 5-block, 6-block radius. So I think that's been really, additive. But out of that, we had several companies really be successful. We had iVerify, which sold to Alibaba. And, we have Backlot Cars that just did a 9-figure acquisition as well. So both of those did 9-figure acquisitions coming out of, kind of the Kansas City area here.
That was definitely I know that with all the success and the community building, you can really tell that the community building opens doors for startups to be successful. And this might be another tough question to answer, but who would you say is the most known entrepreneur from your community?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Because there's so many. And I think what's unique about Kansas City is that everyone's accessible, right? So the Davions and Davion Rosses and the Tobys and the Matts and all those other people are accessible. If you're in Kansas City, you know exactly who I'm talking about, right? I can go first names and you're like, okay, Matt 1, okay, Matt 2, like, okay, so, right? Like David, yeah, I love him, and so like in terms of those, like they're all super accessible. This is why everyone knows them. And so that's, I think, what makes it so great is that no matter like who they are, or if they sold for like 10 figures or 9 figures, or, like went on to lead like, Hearst or, whoever, like for a while, or they're the, whatever it is, like they like care about building up other entrepreneurs and growing the community. And that's what really is fantastic. So you have like that where you can touch base with them and they can help save you some of those heartaches. Right. And then you have the community aspect of it. And then you have the like companies who like are solely there because they got tired of, like, for example, this company Hypercubed, like with no E's. It's just like they're not a fan of the E's, I guess. But but it's like HYPRCUBD. Like they just got tired of seeing all of these startups take the AWS free credits, and then as they went to scale, like they would get like all kinds of fees. And so they're like, like one of them's like one of the creators of the cloud, right? And so he's like, I'm tired of this, daggone it. And so they created Hypercube to give like more functionality faster and for like 1/10 of the price that it gets charged, right? And so like I think like at the point where you have people developing companies to help other entrepreneurs out because of problems they've heard in the community, like I think that's just really such a beautiful thing to me, Mm-hmm. And like it's like they don't care about like how much money they make. They're doing it to help out. And I think that's the distinguishing factor.
So you've answered like all the questions that I have, but I guess one more is just, are there any news outlets or blogs or other podcasts that you'd recommend listeners take a look at?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'd say, so Startland News is like a must for the area. I think the EDC might be getting ready to launch a podcast. I'm not sure. Actually, I don't even know if I was supposed to tell people that. Well, it's out, so surprise. Exclusive. I need the foghorn, like,
Don't worry, we can you let me know when I can shift this our episode to be after the news actually comes out.
I'm not sorry. I care, but I am not sorry. So I'd say Startland News is a great place to start. And then outside of that, like just pinging one of the organizations and like 1 Million Cups Kansas City, and like they'll just shoot you to whoever you need to meet and whoever you need to know. It's a very like communal kind of like that's my. I almost messed up. Like I jammed that first time and this looked like I saw gang signs, but like that it's a very communal kind of environment and atmosphere, and it's one where like no one really like feels like they're competing per se. It's like everyone wants everyone else to win, and they'll share knowledge and intel and tools and stuff like that to help that happen. Even office space, like they'll like the more successful entrepreneurs will open up their offices since they're already paying for it to like the newer entrepreneurs as well. So there's just, and then you get to like like what I think they realized when I was like, it's like that allows you to then ask their developers questions, like ask them, which are like the really good developers or really good like graphic designers or things like that, And so like that's really key. And even like for us with Lily and James Creative, like we pivoted in the middle of COVID. to make our teams that are, Emmy nominated, that helped develop like Chick-fil-A's like stuff and like a bunch of other really like well-known brands. Like we pivoted to make those teams available as like a fractional marketing department for those people who could no longer afford to like bring people in for marketing. So like, because we saw a real need for like people to still have great content because they produce something that is better than their, more established competitors, but they just didn't have the same huge budget that those competitors have. So I think like everyone's, just trying to do their part to help out each one another. And that's one of the things that's really special. It's not like a braggadocious or anything like that. It's not really competitive in that sense. It's like everyone wants everyone else to win, and they'll like help. Like if they have investors, they'll share their investors. If they have talent, they'll like let their talent help other people, and I think that's really what makes it special. Like outside of just like the super cheap rent and like, everyone, your talent costing less, I think it's like that community atmosphere.
You speak very warmly and very like happily about your ecosystem. And I can tell you're very passionate about it and that you're really appreciative of like where you are. I guess my question was, do you think that is specific to the Midwest, or do you think that because Midwest culture is very much like, let me help you. Do you need help with something? And from my experience, it's been very outgoing. Do you think that that has something to do with your community, or do you think that's just startups and entrepreneurs as a whole?
Yeah. I don't want to alienate anyone by saying like their ecosystem like isn't like that. There's some, I will say there are some ecosystems, and if you're listening, I'm talking about you, where it is a little bit more braggadocious, or it is a little bit more competitive in nature, or it is a little bit more like everyone's out for themselves, or they'll like find an investor and hoard it, or find a resource and hoard it, or do whatever. I think that so I do think that at least part of the culture that we have here is because we were the last stop on some of the trails, like your Oregon Trail, for example. And so you all needed each other by the time you got here, because you had to make friends and you had to bear your problems and your, soul to those people around you, because, you're getting ready to go on a journey where you don't know when you might need that person's help. And they might just pass you along and be like, hey, but, let me like take some of what I have to give to you so that we both can make it, And so you didn't have the luxury of being like for yourself, just purely like, for yourself. And, with that, I think came a sense of like, just real honesty, right? There's some ecosystems where, people will be like, how's it going? And they're like, great, man. Love it, man. Just everything's amazing. And then like they shut down like later that week. Right. And so like, I think that for us, because we have that culture of helping one another, it's also okay for us to then, say, hey, here's some of the challenges I'm facing. And then that person can say, hey, I actually faced that as well. And then they can give you some advice that actually helps you go through that issue, but you would never have gotten there if you didn't kind of bare your soul a little bit and be, painfully transparent sometimes. But it's a warm enough culture to where it allows you to do that.
Thank you so much for all this information. This has been very helpful for the podcast, and I'm sure for the listeners as well. Do you have any last parting thoughts that you'd like to share at all?
Go Kansas City. No, I mean, I hope that everyone who's creating amazing things continues to do so, but is able to encourage both their cities around them and the leadership in those cities to support them in doing that. I think that's kind of the next big thing for us, is getting the support from all of our, policymakers who still think that big business creates all the jobs, which has not been the case for a very long time, but they're not in this world. So we've got to bring them in that way. So yeah, and then everyone can reach out to us at William James Creative or to me, Eze Redwood. There's I think only 2 of us on LinkedIn. So yeah, just search, you'll find me. Look for the wild hair and reach out.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for everyone for listening.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from a person who's building it, I'm going to link back up with Nick to clarify on some jargon and take a deeper dive into this ecosystem.
So, Caitlin, you just got done talking with Eze. How did it go?
It went awesome. We had a great conversation. I can't wait to kind of get into some of my takeaways and stuff.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. You started answering the question before I could even ask it. What were some of your biggest takeaways?
So we talked a lot about resiliency and entrepreneurship. So he said something that really stood out to me about how entrepreneurs or just business owners in general can hear incredible news at one point of the week, and then at the end hear about how they don't have a customer anymore or things like that. So those 2 polar opposites. We talked about how he kind of said this sink or swim mentality. So you can either feel like woe is me, or you can get back up, brush yourself off, and keep going. And that just really spoke to me, especially when we're dealing with COVID right now and how we need to adapt. And that's going to make or break you, whether you can or can't adapt. So that meant a lot to me, and it gave me a lot to think about. And then one other takeaway, Nick, I think we are unofficially sponsored by oat milk now. So because like when you saw Eze and I kind of just bonded over how much we really appreciate oat milk in our coffee.
So I worked at a Starbucks when I was starting my company, to pay bills. I worked at a Starbucks, and Starbucks customers, especially was at a resort, and Starbucks customers can be kind of a pain in the ass. I'll say it. They're kind of difficult. And the most difficult ones are the ones that get angry when you don't have oat milk. Common thing. Getting like I was working cash register and people would be pissed off that we didn't have oat milk. And we had 3 other types of non-dairy milk. So it wasn't even like the non-dairy thing. So I've never tried oat milk, and I kind of have a thing against oat milk because of that. However, I'm a big fan of almond milk. If we're now just doubling, this episode is just by non-dairy milk. I love it.
No, I worked at a Dunkin', actually. We're learning so much. But yes. I worked at a Dunkin', and I had the same thing where before we got the oat milk, people were very much, you don't have oat milk. And I didn't get it. I was like,
voice.
why is exactly. Yep,
it's that
just
voice.
like that.
You don't have oat milk?
Yeah, I'm like, ma'am, I don't even know what it is. But then I would recommend, I know you're probably jaded about it, but I would recommend, it is so good. I think it beats almond milk personally. It's so creamy.
All right, I'll have to check it out. And to the last thing, and then we're going to start going back on ecosystem builders. Yeah. I don't understand how oats can be turned into milk. There's something I don't get it.
I don't know. I think it's just the water product and mushing it together. I have no idea. But yeah, unofficially sponsored by Non-Dairy Milk, the Ecosystem Builder podcast. Yeah.
So yes, what other ecosystem related things did you take away?
So he also brought up co-working spaces, and what he kind of mentioned that I hadn't really thought of before, or I thought about it but not actually put words to it, is that depending on your location, you're more productive in certain aspects. So as he mentioned that he'd go to one coffee shop over another if he wanted to work on graphics, but then he mentioned he'd go to a different one if he wanted to work on a different aspect. So that compartmentalizing based on location, I thought that was very fascinating. And then, that productivity based on different locations.
Yes. And even on that, I totally get it. There's some coffee shops that I know I'm going to see everyone at. And sometimes on a Friday afternoon, it's nice to kind of be working, but kind of social hour before COVID. Mm-hmm. But then other times when you actually have things to do, you can't sit there and the fact that every single person coming in and out of the door, it gets annoying. So I totally see that. Was there anything you had to look up after?
Not too much jargon, but there were 2 startups I checked out. It was We the Project and Startland News. Both of them focus on kind of entertainment. Startland News focuses more on like digital publication of Kansas City creatives. And just because I'm very fascinated in like film entertainment sort of industry, We the Project definitely had some cool startups. So that's what I checked out after our conversation.
Yes, actually, Startland News, I follow on social media and consume some of their content.
Oh, no way.
And they definitely like play a vital role. Like the thing we are a big champion of at Mug.News is the value of storytelling in an entrepreneurship community. And Startland News is a very, very good source for the Kansas City community. So yes, yeah, I echo that. Like, definitely a good one to look up.
Well, yeah, that was like my highlights of the interview. I don't have much else. So Nick, do you want to read us out?
Of course. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder podcast, which is a product of Mug.News and hosted by myself, Nick Kastner, and Caitlin Clays. If you have any questions about today's episode, connect with us on Twitter at Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at Mug.News Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. We release episodes every Wednesday morning, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a beat.